Okay, so many of you know me a little bit, and I'm going to let you know that this is being live streamed also. We're also going to go through a little bit rapidly because we're a little off schedule. We started an hour later, so I will probably be skipping over some of the slides, fast forwarding through some of them. Oh, there's already a question. Do you want me to come up and advance the slides for you? That would be great. Okay, here's my assistant. You have to click, I think, the mouse. This is how that works. So okay, another question. It's very hard to see. Should I stand more in the light? Okay, I can do that. So the first art on the planet was discovered in caves, stenciling or different ways of putting imprints on walls. And so in prehistoric times, they have found Australia, all over the world, these graphics and hieroglyphics in caves, and they're the oldest in the planet. And that was like the oldest language. So there's a lot of different theories that people have espoused why there were so many hand shapes, but it was antlers, it could be hands, and the first language on Earth was sign language. People did not speak because they did not have the vocal capacity to speak. So they did sign language. That's the theory, that they did some kind of gesture or a way of communicating, and they put those visualizations on caves. And so visual art, it's really important that we recognize it's part of our history, that we've used sign language for the beginning of time. So we went from there to see some of the signing first. So we're verifying that. And then some people thought, well, there's some artwork that's been kind of new. But no, the Devia isn't something that maybe just occurred in 1989. We have artifacts and proof that artists were depicting the deaf experience even back then. So for example, Goya, a hearing artist who became deaf in his 50s, very, very famous artist, very well known, did not realize that he had become deaf, just assumed that he was hearing because he had been hearing, in his younger life. But if you look at this image, people sort of start to theorize that maybe he was deaf. There's a lot of emphasis on the closed ears. What other images do you see? Yes, hands down at the sides. Maybe oralism, because that was predominant, so sign language wasn't allowed. And then we have this one over here by a deaf artist from France. An art teacher, again, as the oralism method started to spread. I know this is a little bit difficult to see, but this is a depiction of a person with a snake coming out of their mouth, and it's just wrapped around their whole body. And then there's off to the side a hand. So if I were interpreting this, I would say maybe oralism is like the snake, the Adam and Eve concept, the temptation, the oralism movement, which is, sort of a temptation to do the speaking. The deaf art movement really became prominent and founded in the late 60s, 70s, 80s. Gallaudet College at that time was one of the founders, and it was by students who started playing around, making art that depicted the deaf experience, and they started playing with hand shapes and experimenting with other art mediums. And so this is from Harry Williams. This is one of his. He is a wonderful artist, truly talented. He died about 40 years after making this, but his artwork still is preserved. Died of AIDS in his 40s. So because of the civil rights movement, ASL started to, become part of the civil rights movement. Any interpretations that you see from this picture? Okay, so you see some of the music notes. Right, you'll see that often in his themes. It's his way of talking about signing, and you'll see a lot of that repeated. There's a body with no face, no head. Again, that's pretty iconic of Harry's work. You'll see some other things. My understanding of some of the artwork, the wiper blades, people were thinking that was like, oh, a gaydar, like they can tell, they've got some gaydar. So people were wishing that they had some kind of way that they could find who are the other deaf people. If you're walking down the street and you do, that's another deaf person. And so you have the ability to, find your other deaf compatriots, sort of like gaydar. Around the 60s and 70s, the students got together at Gallaudet, and now we're in 1975 to the 80s. And an art colony was founded. People were there year-round, and it was in Austin, Texas. I wish I had been one of the people that have gone there. They had a board of advisors, they had summer internships, and it was really a think tank for artists, and not only just people that did art, but people that did poetry and theater. So this is one of the artworks that became well-known and an outgrowth of the Austin, Texas group. We signed Spectrum using this hand shape. Some of you who founded Spectrum, for example, Betty Miller, she bought property there. Chuck Baird lived there for a while. Then the money ran out and it was disbanded. But we really feel like that was not the end. So there were a variety of workshops that occurred, and people had a further discussion about not deaf art. We didn't finish what we set out to do. Remember, we have this rich history. So, we had people, deaf artists that were doing trees and landscapes and things like that, and those were deaf artists and deaf art because it was created by a deaf person. But we want to show something a little bit more. We want to be more inclusive about the deaf experience. And we felt like that just a deaf artist wasn't broad enough. So after a lot of thought, we came up with DeVia. So it's Deaf View Image Art. And there was a manifesto that was created, some principles and guidelines, and everyone in that group signed on. And then in 2016, many of you might have known about the founding of the group in Chicago. They looked at that and they made a couple additions to it. So the 4 days that people got together, a huge mural was created. Red, yellow, blue, you see the colors that are emanating from that person's head that, depicts creativity, the triangle, the view, that we don't hear, we don't speak, but the eyes are the predominant part of us, the collaboration with the hands. One person put this extra part, which is the soul, and it's encapsulated within the pyramid or triangle. That's deaf heart. And different parts of autism and things that we were against, things like hearing aids and things like that, were depicted also. So that was a range of everyone's weighing in on. And so here is Deaf View Image Art, 1989. So we signed Deaf View Image Art. So we do image on the palm. So it's Deaf View Art. Deaf View Art. But it's really, people think it's just like a visual, the V means visual, but it's view. we want to emphasize, and I'm sorry that the lights flicker every so often. We're not sure why that occurs. So we summarized what words we came up with to describe the movement. We put the apostrophe in as an homage to the French because ASL came as a work from the French language. So we put the little apostrophe in there as an homage to them. View, obviously, is the deaf experience, and image art. And then what we did also with the hash part, it's same time that you have the view and the hand, so it's showing that it's a simultaneous sign. So it's really cool because it looks at sign language. It's not English. You know, there's like a group that got together and said, oh, we're going to follow English and make this word and it's going to be great. No, it's not an English construct at all. We went totally with the deaf view image art experience. So for Devia, after the manifesto was written, we decided it was going to emphasize a few things. Now remember, this is 89, which is some 30 years ago. So, you know, we're celebrating 30 years now. The manifesto said the visual art only. And it was focused primarily with the United States. The deaf experience was a qualification. We have deaf artists, as I said before, right, and they also do abstract work and they also do Devia. That's fine. But we have to have some kind of deaf experience interwoven into the artwork. Tends to use bold colors, tends to use colors that are opposite of each other, contrasting. There needs to be a central focus that draws your attention, could be the middle part. There are several motifs, and we have each and today we're going to expand on the 4 motifs as you go and create maybe more, but eyes, mouths, ears, and hands were the typical motifs that we started with. Oh, sorry, one more. And the manifesto said it could be a hearing or a deaf person. Some deaf people said, well, no, hearing people can't do Devia art. And we said, yes, they can, if it represents the deaf experience. So should hearing people say, oh, I do Devia art? No, we don't want people hijacking our art. But there are some hearing people that can show the deaf experience through art. Again, see bold colors, central themes of the eyes, contrasting, hands are very prominent. Again, some examples of artwork. So it was interesting as people in the US experienced the civil rights movement and then other types of movements became involved, we started seeing, wow, Devia had a lot of intersectionality with other groups. And then you also know the famous statement, some of you are familiar with Susan Dupour, you know Chuck Baird from Gallaudet. Many of my students, my former students that went to Gallaudet, they said, if you see go into the cafeteria and you have to look up, and some of them didn't even know his artwork was there. I had to tell them, no, it's not at eye level, it has to go up. So I took a picture of one of the murals. So a child that's deaf is looking up to another person, and that's a common experience. And a lot of deaf artists use sort of baldness. And so, yeah, right? So some people think that themes are alien. No, it's that they don't have hair. Again, strong use of color, contrasting, the hands are prominent. Now this is the Day War. This is an Israeli artist. And sometimes, you know, in Israel they had wars. The 6-Day War was one that was very important for children. They had to go into bunkers and hide. And they had candles, and you know, they had to have the lights off because of the, you know, the wind would blow out the candles. And so they could only sign when they had a little teeny bit of light. This one is by Tony McGregor. And again, it's Southwest style shows the variety of experiences that people have. So since 1989, we started looking at a variety of slides, and we saw things that were in common. There were ears, there were eyes. We started putting things in categories, and as time went on, we started to realize that with pictures and doing some assessment, there was a specific structure, that some are showing resistance, some are showing pride, some are working with resistance that became affirmation or liberation. So I'm going to explain a little bit more about resistance and affirmation. So if you look over here at the famous artist Betty Miller, most people are very familiar with her artwork, the family dog. That's something that most people recognize her for, but also this Amaslan prohibited. You see why the fingers are broken? You imagine why? Because sign language wasn't allowed. And how do you stop children from signing, right? You remember that people were hit with a punishment as rulers. Now, I've found out that that could still occur even today. They were telling me a story about they were trying to speak and they couldn't do that. So they got a yardstick, not the little ruler, a yardstick, and whacked them in the mouth. And that caused them to scream. And another teacher came and said what was going on, and their eyes welled up with tears, and the teacher said, "Oh, it's fine." That day, the student became mute, refused to use their voice after that. And so, many stories about being hit in the hands, but this one just really took me by surprise. So this is a very powerful motif of resistance, that people were chained, fingers are broken, that sign language was forbidden. So again, the theme of autism. On the other continuum, you have affirmation. So resistance means to show the oppression, but affirmation is a celebration of who we are. And Chuck Baird worked at the Rochester School for the Deaf in collaboration with the students there, and they created a clock with hands. And 1, 3, and 6, and 9, the clock face, and the hands show the different parts. And so any time is a good time to sign. That was the theme for that. Any time is a good time to sign. And so it depicts a variety of the hands. This is another amazing work, which we'll talk a little bit more about in detail. But this is, again, for the affirmation and liberation. That signing has continued. That language has continued. It has not been destroyed or done away with. So the motif of the morning, where people have their hands up, they're proud. Again, so like the clock, any time is a good time to sign. So in looking at the artworks, many themes emerged, which we broke down into motifs. And then we developed some different cards that we could show children to have more of an understanding of the difference between resistance and affirmation, and to cause some critical thinking to occur. So the deafhood concept, some people are familiar with it, some are not. But as I've met a lot of artists, I've asked them about, why you make art. And a lot of deaf people had a quote-unquote awakening that when they started seeing these themes emerge, that deafhood was really part of that experience. Paddy Ladd from Ireland, and started that movement and started talking about that, wrote quite widely about that. So deafhood looks at people as people, not as a mistake, not as something that should be shunned. They're people, they have a language, they have a culture, they have a deafhood, and that they have a rich history that they pass on. And that autism is not okay, and that we need to challenge that. And that looking at deafness as a gain and a celebration is more important than looking at it as a challenge. and something to be overcome. So deafhood is a part of that, ethnicity, deaf gain. And so Alexander Martynov worked on the cover. He's a Russian deaf artist. I think his name sign, it's a candle. And I said, how did he come up with that shape? And she said, well, it's a spiritual aspect. It could represent a church or a temple. So that hand shape there, you see them sitting, and there's on their ear, you see that sort of appendage that's coming out of that. I know it's hard to see, but there is a shape of a hand. If you look at it, it's actually a hand with an H hand shape. Whose hand do you think that is? There's a man behind them or a man above? Okay, but they have the H hand shape. It's going into the ear. We think it might be God. That's the sign for deaf in European countries. There's no body. Again, there's just a hand, so it's coming from above, and it includes the whole arm and hand. So it could be deaf, and maybe represents deafhood. That we're not a mistake. We're supposed to be on the planet. We were ordained by God. And that diversity is really important, because without diversity, the world would be very boring. This one, I'm going to let Nancy speak to this. Okay, I hope you can see me here. So that was made in 2010, and at that time, in Canada, they were having a conference. I believe it was the ICED, which stands for International Conference of Educators of the Deaf. So in 2010, there were some Italian people who had come, and they said that ASL had been banned. And finally, over 135 years later, they removed that and actually got an apology from the people in Italy. And I was inspired by that person, Mary Fortinelli. She was a deaf author, and she was inspired by Goya, the 3rd of May, 2008. So looking at Goya's work, it was almost as similar to hers, and then the three of us were like, isn't this interesting? These are themes that we did separately, but they overlap. And so she has ASL with the crack, soldiers firing, and on mine, after the 2010, where the apology was given and ASL was accepted, that's when I made my artwork. That finally it's been recognized, and that everyone is in celebration, and the soldiers have given up and are, laying there. So there's like a hidden message. If you look at the background, you can see the Clark Tower. The Clark Tower. Morning, the clock is very prominent on the Gallaudet campus, and every day we start fresh. It's a new day, and it's a new era. So, Nancy, if I could add the soldiers that are laying down. The soldiers' guns, they've given those up. So it's changed to, instead of using the guns, using their hands. So again, hidden words, hidden messages within the artwork. Sign language prevails. I caught some of the letters. When I started seeing what you were working on, I emailed you and I said, I'm sure there's more. And Nancy said, I'm not going to tell you. You have to find those yourself. And I know there's some hidden messages, and I've asked people. People are saying, well, I can't read that, and she has kept mum about that. Gallaudet owns that artwork now. I think it's in which department? Oh, it's in the Deaf Studies department in the hallway at Gallaudet. So they're the owners of this. Oh, is there a question? Oh, would you mind going back to one slide? I want to see if I can catch some of the letters. Oh, I want to go back to the slide that is all of the artwork. Okay, so it will take you some time to study this. This is Nancy, if I can point out a few of the pieces here. You have to look from here to here, and that's where you can see the words embedded into the artwork. Prevails. I caught some of them, but not all of them. So Nancy started making her art really many, many years ago, and is well known. And we're really happy that we have a lot of the artwork that she's done. And it's really inspired David Call, another Divya artist who does things, he sculpts, and his image of the moon and somebody looking, a young girl looking up there. We came, we saw, we overcame. There you saw the message from Nancy's. So the resistance is one motif, and now it's affirmation. Yeah, I explained. Another, and this one is hard to see, but it's a person, and they're looking up at a tree, and there's wires from the tree. And that's by Paul Searcy, and he created everything himself. This is really popular deaf hood motif. So a lot of artists like to use hands and eyes. So 2013, we had a conference in Kansas. We hadn't developed a curriculum or anything formal, just 40 artists that came in and talked about art, and it was hosted by the Kansas School for the Deaf. And we decided that we would make another mural to honor the mural from 1989. The first one in 1989 disappeared, and nobody knows. It was in the Warren Building. That's where we met that day, and we decided we would create this mural. It was hung there, and 4 days later, or almost a week later, it disappeared. We're not sure if it was stolen. We have contacted over the years, can you look in your basement, in your archives? People have looked everywhere, and we feel like part of our history is gone. So we wanted to pay a little bit of honor, the 25th anniversary, so we decided, okay, 2013, we are going to make, with all of our handprints and all of our different views of art, we made the motif with a black background, strength. Again, you see the pyramid or triangle, again, showing the shifts in Divya. So what we decided to come up with at Kansas School for the Deaf during that conference, we had a training, we decided to make curriculum, and we decided to disperse it among people at the school, the students. You know, if they go to a tournament, maybe they'll see some collaboration. So we wanted to have something that was easily recognizable as a collaboration at the various schools for the deaf. Now, for some of you, so if you are a teacher and you need a refresher course or whatever, or something, you've moved to a different school, let us know, and we would be happy to make sure that you have one. Yes, some of you have said it's in your art room. Well, in 2013, when we made that design, we talked about what's next. We wish we could categorize things. Well, one of the founders was thinking that maybe it would be really important to have a curriculum. So Guy Wonder decided that he would put it together and say it was going to be part of an art history or art curriculum, and not just embedded in the art program. So we worked on that, and some people were saying, well, we need something that is important and that teachers in colleges can incorporate. So deaf schools are more aware of this, but we are putting it together. So we're planting the seed, And we're hoping that with Guy's influence, that can come to different colleges. So Guy, you said that you would do that, right? So in 2014, we made this a little more formalized in a curriculum. And it was important to incorporate deafhood and DeVia. So the mind, the cognitive engine is always running. And schools have suffered, not deaf schools, but parents, maybe some of the teachers have low expectations, you know, the old can't. And we know that deaf can. They're very creative. We just need to turn on that cognitive switch and get the juices flowing. So I'm wondering if we incorporate hearing artists into the mix. Would that have that kind of curriculum? Would that be embedded? So Guy is talking about maybe because we have Black history, we have a variety of different histories, that to be more inclusive in the communities, if it were a hearing school, they were showing resistance to the art or the history of it, the culture, it would be something that we could talk to the hearing schools and say, this is art. And I know a lot of schools myself, this is now Patty talking, people will study a little piece of that as a general art. But I know some of the hearing schools are very, very open to that. But I think we really need to do some more pounding on doors to get them to acquire that. I mean, we have feminist art and Black art, and so I think we should accelerate that process. I'd like to make a suggestion for Jenna and Fran. Could we have somebody fix the lights or do something? I know it's really difficult on the audience, and I see some people suffering and, you know, kind of jumping every time the lights flicker to a degree. So is that something? Well, what if we turn those lights off because we know they're broken and they can't be fixed? Okay, so we'll see if we can solve the problem by actually just turning the lights off. Okay, not too much because now you can't see me. Go toward the light. Okay, so if I stand here, and can you see the screen? Well, I can't see you, but if you can see me and the screen. Okay. So back to the PowerPoint, it's an appreciation of modalities, creating a safe cultural environment, language development. All of that was part of the manifesto, and I would love to see really a little bit more sensitivity to that. I know not everyone can view this. I think it's important that we develop, wait, I'm sorry. I'd like to see a little more incorporation of tactile artists into the art movement as well. I think it's important that for deafhood that we teach that and that we also create a safe place. And I see many of you are talking about, whoa, it's a hot, great place to incubate ideas, and that teachers are incorporating that. And some deaf teachers are saying, oh, I'm not going to use that part. So we need to host workshops, and we have been doing that to sort of incorporate and get other people to come. And some of the ones that we've done in the past, there are tears. And you know, people have had bad experiences with art. It's not just the beautiful thing. It moves people in a way that is unbelievable. And you know, it's like people will say, well, it's the wrong place to express that. No, we need to create those safe havens for people to be creative and to represent that in any way that they've experienced. We have deaf people now with a video. We can acquire language. We can share our art and DeVia in a lot of different ways, so it's wonderful. Deafhood also has allowed deaf people to see where they belong in the world. Again, that idea that we are a mistake, and instead look at it as we are gifts to the world. And so how to live in a hearing and deaf world, that we don't get marginalized. And this is the annual, I think it's been 6 years. It was hosted in Rochester. It was in California. Let's see. It was in Maryland here. I want to thank here for hosting it 1 year. And there's explanation of the different colors and the motifs. I'm going to have Nancy talk a little bit about that when she does her presentation. The flag colors we're also going to emphasize a little bit more later. They all have a concept that's very important. Now this, for some of you that were involved with this was in honor of the first annual and second annual. And some of these are housed at your school, and they accompanied a nice video with them in some cases. So this was a few years ago, some of them, and then some of these are more recent. Many of the schools, hearing or deaf, have various competitions, and students make a variety of art things. And some students will say, well, they didn't include me in that, and okay, my art didn't get selected. But we still encourage students, and we don't want students to feel sad. So again, Guy Wonder was saying, we notice that it's always by individual. And we are all about the group and collaboration and how we can support each other in the process. So that's why we made a mural of the groups. So it has to follow Guy Wonder's criteria, mixed media, the different criteria. So we now have moved into this type of competition, which is very nice. Again, for DeVia, we have a formal curriculum. We have a variety of cards that we show the students to give them some ideas. And then since we've established the curriculum, going on 6 years, we've really seen a lot of emerging deaf artists and more complicated and more impressive artwork by children. My goodness. Again, we've seen intersectionality, we've seen race, we've seen ethnicity, transgender issues. Again, we believe that this shows that those have been safe havens for students to be creative. And that's how to contact me. Could we have the lights up for a moment, please? Oh, Fran, are you going to go up? Hi. Okay, thank you. Thank you, John Moser. If you have questions for Patty, you can ask them. Well, are your resources available online? If you type in DeVia curriculum, it's there, so you can go ahead and do that. Okay, so then we're going to move on. Our next presenter, wait. Our next presenter, Nancy, are you ready? Thank you. Okay, so could we have the lights dimmed again so they don't do that flickering thing? Thank you, whoever's up there. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming today. I want to share with you a little bit about the artist in residence. I've been able to do that at a variety of deaf schools, and I do murals with the schools, and that's what I'm going to talk primarily about today. Would you be my advanced slide clicker for me? Thank you, Patty. Oh, gosh. This is how I introduce myself to show you. This is my studio. I took a picture to give you an idea of what it looks like. So this is pretty recent. And this is how busy I am. I do traveling, and I don't have time to really clean. So that's fine with me. So in total, we have 27 murals in deaf schools all over the country. I also showed you where they are and their size and shape and whether they're inside or outside. So, a pretty impressive list. I'm going to show you the process and how these murals are created. This just gives you an idea of where I have gone and where I've given presentations. So there's a lesson plan, and we've established that for curriculum, so many of you can follow that and how the mural process can work. You can have an artist in residence to come work with you, but you have this curriculum ready for you to start with. So the colors that I've been typically using for this week, you've seen that. I've explained to some of you that are here all week. We use in-house paint. It's a latex. Sometimes we'll use a different kind that you can use that will stay more. I like a flat, not a varnish or shiny, a satin or a gloss. I like the flat. So for me, I think it's better, like cameras can take pictures so that I can categorize my art. Some people like that glossy part. It's easy to keep clean. So you have your own preferences, I have mine. So latex can be water-based. There's less chemicals in it. A satin or a gloss has more chemicals in it. There's an odor that maybe is not pleasing or is not even safe for staff and students. So I have a list ready that I'm happy to share with people so that when schools are wondering what are the materials and what are safe, I've already gone through and done that for you, and I can furnish that list. And then I use a color code. I use the Sherwin-Williams brand. Those of you that like a different one, you can go into Home Depot and see what ones. You can bring a same code number, and Home Depot can match that color for you. I don't really like using, I like using the rack for those because it's easy to have the numbers. I can use it no matter where I go. If there's paint left, you can use it in your classroom for any other projects because it stays. So these are the 7 colors in my palette, the red, yellow, blue that I use, and then black, white, and then the 2 grays, so 7 altogether. Again, I'm referring to the curriculum. This has a lot of really good information for ASL classes, deaf study classes, art, to show the colors and their purposes. There's a reason behind them. Red is power. Yellow means hope, a positive future. People need to see each other in that light. Blue means oppression. A light blue means deafhood. Black and white doesn't have a meaning, but sometimes it supports and makes more vibrant the other colors that we're using. I'll give you a minute to read the murals for Michigan School for the Deaf. Let me explain a little bit about the Michigan School for the Deaf. A few months ago, I was there, and it took 6 months to prepare and plan the mural. I asked the school, what basically are you looking for? Do you want something that's going to go on the wall? Where? Do you want a history because they're celebrating the 150th celebration of their school? So they gave me all the information, guidelines, some historical facts, very rich history at that school. They all have all the materials from day one, which they provided to me. So it took a long time for me to sort through and study. I read every piece of information that they gave me. The buildings, the people, the principles, the timeline. And I studied all of that. So from that, I culled a few discussion points, and we eliminated some of the pieces, and then we worked together for the overall design. So before I go on, let me stop a little bit about the art and talk about the artists in residency. It's different in some places than I have it in the past. Michigan was the first place to establish deaf artist in residency program, meaning alumni from that school prepared and fundraised. They wrote grants to make sure that they had enough money to hire an artist in residence, pay for their food, their hotel, their airfare, and a stipend. And it was wonderful. Some schools have no budget for that. They can't afford to bring in an artist. So at that school in Michigan, they made sure that that could occur, and it was really wonderful. So we started with an outline. We put together all of our ideas. We met with alumni, and I also included the staff. There were probably about 20 people altogether sharing ideas, what people liked, what they wanted to have eliminated. We met maybe 2 or 3, 4 times to kind of edit the process, and finally we had something we could all agree on. There are 36 scenes embedded in this mural. So you can see that there's a lot going on. So the history of the school shows that students were workers. They had old photographs in their museum, and they allowed me to take pictures of them. I visited the old superintendent's house that the students had built. I had access. They let me open up drawers and go through places and take a variety of pictures. So what an honor for me to have access to all that information. So then I was able to go back and start some sketches. We started working, and we really worked intensely for 1 week. I was there for the second week. The mural actually started the second week. I flew in, and we got immediately to work. Really, time was so precious. We got right to work. So we projected the images on the wall, and the next day, we just went from part to part to part. And I wanted to incorporate everybody on the mural, not just a small elite group that were artists. We wanted everyone. Some people said, oh, I'm not good at painting well. We said, you can do that. And it really inspired them, and they felt like they were included. Preschool to 12, all the students had an opportunity to be involved. And I just really enjoyed that experience. And staff were also joined in, and the superintendent. So we were even able to get the superintendent involved. This is from Washington School in Vancouver. And it's a very, very small school, very, very old. I think it's one of the oldest, if not the oldest. But it was built by Olaf Hansen, and the architecture is very, very beautiful, but it's so old, and because of earthquakes, it's been deemed unsafe, so it's going to have to be destroyed. I was working in the basement of another building, another very, very old building. So that program really didn't have a DeVia focus. The teacher there didn't really talk a lot about DeVia. It was kind of a new concept for them. So they wanted to do a mural in the cafeteria, and so I helped them with that. Buffalo School for the Deaf, St. Mary's, their mural, another 7 big panels. When you come into the school, there's a staircase on either side, and the pictures go up the staircase. So some of them are up on the 2nd floor. And the mural is depicting the mission statement of the school, what their belief system is. So it's not about the history or things like that. It's just the individual panels that show their mission statement. But the panels do depict the history. It's not finished. I'm hoping to go back this fall and to finish the other segments. Phoenix Day School. This is in Arizona. Is one of the teachers here from Phoenix? I think they are. I worked with them. Again, that school is not very old. I think it was established maybe 50, 51 years ago. So compared to other schools, it's relatively young. But what's interesting about that school, it's the first school, the first 30 students from that school, they have farms, sheep, animals that were on the farm for those students. The man on the right is the founder of the school. And the superintendent, who is deaf-blind, wonderful superintendent, is on the left. And then the individual people are parents. They represent the parents. The first 6 parents who wanted to establish a school. And finally, I think, how many graduates that first year? I forget. Can you remind me? That was in 6 or 7, I think. But the building was the first one established. And when you go into the building, there's a new part, and it was designed by a deaf architect. I'm blanking on his name. Oh, that's right, John Dixon. He designed the building. So that mural is hung in the new building. So it was really an honor for me to do that. And I was there for a week also. Do you remember the size? It was there were 2 of them, 4 by 8, 6 by 8. Indiana School for the Deaf was another one that was celebrating, I believe, their 175th. Can you help me with that? Was it 175th? No. I would say, how many years was, when we did that, what was the foundation? 175 this week. This week. So I believe 5 murals were commissioned, 4 by 8, that we also did in 1 week. What a lot of work. I mean, morning, noon, night, overnight, morning, noon, and night continuously. And I didn't want to leave until it was completed. I really was not going to feel satisfied. But there was one little part that was not completed, but luckily the other people collaborated. And I know in Buffalo there were some pieces unfinished, as I told you earlier. The teachers from middle school and high school also helped. This gives you an idea of some of the places where they were hung. And it's a complicated process because it's an old building. So you've got those thick plaster, stone, concrete walls. It's not easy to drill into. So we were fortunate we could hang them. This is the first, no, maybe not the first. This is, I think, the second outside mural. That one has a glossy, and that was a David Call assistance with me. We kind of went back and forth about that, but I wanted it flat and he liked shiny, but you know, I gave it to him. I let him kind of have that because, again, it can keep clean much easier. This is not all students that paint. Students from the community also, not just from the school. They had to do community service. They were older students, like students who are going to be graduating. Some have graduated, and they stay there till they're 22. There's a program called community service, and so those students could come back, and they did pieces of that. So during that week, was unbelievable. There was a really bad fire in Northern California, and a lot of the wineries were on fire. People had to wear masks. There was smoke in the air. It was a horrible fire in Northern California. I just want to show you a few more of the lesson plans that are part of the curriculum. So for Devia, how you use color, how you incorporate contrasting colors. Yesterday, some of you, we talked about that lesson plan for the hands and the overlap and overlay and how we did that with contrasting colors. So these are student projects from CSUN, or from CSD, sorry. These are high school students. They focused on their aspect for their grade. So this was part of their history program. They wanted students to pick a favorite using use of Devia color. And some of this was also from Indiana School for the Deaf. So the elementary school students, they were charged with focusing on, you know, what is the history of the Indiana School for the Deaf. So they already had that list. And so students had to pick a small portrait or a small, like a building or a person. And they picked from those pre-assigned lists. And then they had a collaboration where they made sure that they could move things around so there was a flow. So there were 48 little panels, and we had to make sure that there was a panel, like not too much of yellow over here or red in this place. So once the students did all of those little panels, we glued them on the back, and then they were incorporated on a frame, which was then hung in the elementary school. Have you seen that? Yes, yes. So at Michigan School, at pre-K to K program, I really enjoyed my time with them. They're so fun. And the assistant staff have to help a little bit. They did the black background, but they left the hands alone. And those are just natural children, how they painted them and how they left them. And then they traced around them, but did not do anything to change the hands. Now, their theme was a school of fish. So they drew their hands and made them look sort of like a fish. So there was a fish that would be this way with the fin, and their eye would be over here. And so you can see it's a variety of placements, and it was just beautiful. Okay, if we could have the lights up, please. So, any questions? Anything you want to know about Rourkeism? Oh, there is a question in the back. Okay. Patty can copy sign, or you can come up front. One of the things that you might know or may know, we've known each other for many, many years. We go way back. We were there the same year, so we've had a long, long friendship. I was a photography major. She was an art major. I'll be honest, I think both of us were probably on the same road trying to find our identity. It really wasn't that clear at that time. We just sort of followed what the school system was and the college, what we were supposed to do, and they told us, you do this to become an artist, and you do this to become a photographer. And that was before DPN. I mean, captioning was just starting on TV. That was during our college years. And when I think about now and where we came, this amazing journey to promote Devia now, and and Patty's involvement, it's just been wonderful. How fortunate that we're still here and able to see this progression. And I really just have to applaud these two for their diligence in promoting this, and that it will continue for future generations. We didn't have that in our time. We didn't have anybody that we would follow except for professors and a prescribed college education. And we knew that making a safe space for deaf people to do their art was the primary goal, and that was done. So thank you so much. Oh, and thank you. Okay, so if you want to stay in your seat. Okay, so were you successful at schools? Well, no, I just primarily do murals. I know I've done other schools. I've gone to other schools, yes, but I just want to show you the murals. There's one more that I didn't share with you. At Michigan School, which was very interesting, they're having issues right now. Last night, actually, they had a town rally to fight for the principal there. Now, prior to these issues occurring, I was there, let's see, I arrived there the first time. There was a board, instead of painting on the wall. I mean, other schools will either paint on the wall or they'll do a mural. But this school, they said, oh no, we did not want this on the wall. And the reason, because every 7 years, their policy changes. Every 7 years, there's something that changes because of the administration or the principals. And they said it's unpredictable. So they were worried that it would be painted over, all this hard work, and they, cherished this. So they said a mural would, hold up to the test of time. So they used a specific kind of board that they put in the wall. Well, it was taken off and can be brought with them. So it was very clever and clairvoyant of them to not have it on the wall. So again, thank you for your questions and your attention. So a break? Anyone interested in a 5-minute break? Sure, okay. Yes, okay, I'm seeing some people saying yes, a break. So please come back in about 5 minutes.